Hello, I'm Home Environmental Consultant John Banta. Today, my presentation is Investigation, Mitigation, Remediation, and Maintenance, a primer for physicians. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to show you the steps that I follow in order to help my clients turn their water-damaged house into a healthy home. Stage 1 requires recognition and acceptance that a problem exists. In stage 2, I will show you the steps I follow and the methods I use to investigate water-damaged homes and determine the problem locations. Stage 3 is remediation. It's performed by controlling the water-damaged contaminants at their source. Stage 4 involves detailed fine particulate cleaning, testing, evaluation, revision, and implementation as needed. These are essential steps that are often omitted. Stage 5 is the reconstruction, maintenance, and upkeep necessary for a healthy home to stay that way. Although this presentation reviews an ideal 25-day investigation and remediation, there will always be extenuating circumstances, delays, and unintended consequences. The timing presented here is fictionalized and represents a best-case scenario. In reality, every case is different, and some steps may be combined into a single day, while others may require multiple days in order to investigate, plan, mitigate, remediate, clean again, and reconstruct. The first thing we need to do is answer the question, is there a problem? Some things that can help answer this question are a history of water damage, visible mold growth or staining, musty, damp, or wet odors. The client's physician may be suspicious or have diagnosed based on patient workup and labs. Initial home environmental testing results may also contribute, as well as professional inspections, including MSQ PCR, oftentimes known as ERMI. When evaluating water-damaged homes, we need tools that are helpful for how we think, record, and communicate about sick buildings. One of these organizational tools, with an origin in the medical community, is based on the acronym SOAP: Subjective, Objective, Assessment, and Plan. The home investigation process begins with subjective information gathering from the client. We then decide how to support the subjective information with objective observations and data collection. We need an understanding of where the known problems are located and why they developed. Not all water damage problems are going to be obvious. Successful discovery and remediation of all the water damage related problems typically involves developing and testing a hypothesis regarding the presence and locations of hidden damage. A goal is to provide additional objective information leading to an assessment. The assessment leads to a flexible plan that can be implemented. Adding the letters IER to the acronym SOAP makes SOAPier, which provides the very important aspects of implementation, evaluation, and revision to the subjective objective assessment and plan. These additional steps are valuable to help ensure remediation success. We are now well on our way towards establishing that there is a problem and laid a foundation for how we're going to think about the process. Let's move on to stage 2, the investigation and sampling. The subjective information provided by the homeowner, occupants, and others involved with the home, plus the objective information developed by the inspections, is going to be used to help formulate a hypothesis. To a trained eye, the obvious issues are apparent. However, it's common for past water damage conditions to have been addressed in ways that were ineffective and resulted in hidden growth and contamination. Mold-specific quantitative PCR is a useful tool to help determine if hidden or unknown conditions are likely to exist. The samples are collected, the chain of custody and analysis request forms are filled out to track the samples and to provide the laboratory the information that they need to understand how the samples are to be analyzed. This is the point where the involved parties need to take stock in the human resources they have available to help them survive, or even better, thrive when addressing mold problems in a home. In order to be successful, a team approach is vital. CIRSx is working to help develop qualified regional resources to assist your patients in this process. The reality is that many regions of the country do not have qualified indoor environmental professionals remediators, or cleaners that have been trained to competently work with your patients. There are many obstacles faced by persons suffering from illness resulting from water damage. Many companies providing remediation or investigations take part in preferred vendor programs and give their allegiance to the referring insurance company. Insurance coverage for mold is usually capped at dollar amounts that are insufficient to address the problems for mold-sensitive people. Code enforcement and public health departments are focused on mold that's visible. If it looks clean and dry, they consider it good. Many of the potential helpers are of the mindset, I'm not sick from mold. Why should I believe this person? CIRSx is working to help develop and implement the training and education needed for investigators, remediation firms, patients, and their families. There are multiple types of resistance and obstacles that are presented when working with families with one or more persons suffering from a sick home. Many hypersensitive clients and their families are dealing with the stages of grief and are working through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. They may lash out or even express thoughts of suicide. Few consultants understand the issues of mold sensitivity. They've been taught that up to 10 square feet of visible mold is a minor problem, and many believe that if water damage or mold is out of sight, there's just no problem. The brain fog, chronic fatigue, and pain experienced by those suffering from exposure to water-damaged buildings interferes with their ability to understand and act to move forward, making their home a healthy one. Friends, family, neighbors are often not as supportive and may in fact present their own obstacles. Family members may decide that their loved one is suffering from mental illness and that the consultant is facilitating the sick person's neurosis. Sometimes HIPAA or confidentiality stands in the way of direct communications with a client's physician. Add to this the really bad internet information in sales and marketing that's resulting in people thinking they don't need to spend money on actually fixing their home, but believe promises to make their problems disappear by simply using a magic device or chemical treatment. These claims are often nothing more than snake oil, and in some cases make the problem worse by trapping moisture, covering up issues instead of fixing them, or interfering with the ability to properly inspect or get valid test results. In our ideal scenario, we have now spent almost a week on investigation, collecting samples, and gathering information. Now the MSQ PCR results are back and are showing multiple likely issues in the home. The objectivity, validity, and helpfulness of the results will only be as good as the consideration given to the sampling and the ability to interpret those results. Sampling strategies were designed to test a variety of hypotheses, but before interpreting the results, we need to perform a quality assurance review. The interpretation of results is always dependent on the conditions in the home, and it's always important to first and foremost determine if the results are likely to be reliable. The laboratories that we use perform a variety of quality assurance procedures and provide the quality assurance information on our reports so that we can interpret if an adequate amount of dust was supplied to avoid skewed results and if partial or total inhibition was present. Inhibition is caused by a number of substances found in homes, such as pet or rodent urine, chlorine, phenol-based biocides, essential oils, including tea tree oil and thyme oil, rust and other metal oxides, humic acid, and clay. When present, these substances can provide misleading low false negatives because they interfere with the DNA analysis. Dr. Bonnie Passmore and I presented our paper on this topic at the Fort Lauderdale Conference in 2019. It is posted in the past conferences section at www.CIRSx.com. When our interpretation of the results is that they're elevated, with some areas where the history, moisture measurements, visual and olfactory clues don't show any of the indications where that problem may be indicated, then we need to use other tools to figure it out. All of this provides subjective and objective information. This then leads to our assessment and a plan. Do we have enough information to move on to implementation? Maybe, maybe not. There may be additional issues that need to be determined by supplemental investigations and sampling. Early this year in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Michael Schrantz, Bonnie Passmore, and I presented information regarding outdoor influences. If you missed that presentation, it's posted at CIRSx.com. Currently, The standards of practice for environmental consultants imply that there's nothing that can be done regarding outdoor levels, so they form the baseline for interpretation regarding what's okay. The problem is that the outdoors can contribute to issues that make people sick and prevent the home from being made healthy. Instead of considering elevated levels of problem types of mold in the outdoors to be okay, the outdoor conditions that lead to illness need to be better understood, avoided, and controlled. Master gardening programs and recycling programs are recommending the use of newspaper or cardboard in yards and gardens as a weed block. This has the unintended consequence of producing massive amounts of Stachybotrys and other organisms associated with adverse reactions in sensitive people in the cardboard or paper. We have increasing evidence that the use of these practices in a yard can affect the indoor environmental quality for neighboring properties. Construction materials and debris that are left unprotected in the rain are able to support mold growth on the materials, and properties that are poorly maintained can influence the indoor environment or their neighbors. These types of considerations may best be taken into account during initial investigations instead of waiting to learn of them after post-remediation failures are tracked back to the outdoor source at the end of the job. HVAC systems are the lungs of the building. If systems are not properly designed, installed, and well maintained, the home cannot be a healthy house. Instead of putting the building on life support by installing expensive, fancy treatment equipment that does not work, or spraying toxic chemicals that also do not work, it is necessary to fix the problems, not merely ignore, treat, or cover up the issues. Dehumidifiers installed in HVAC systems are practically impossible to keep clean and to service. They may quickly become more of a problem than a solution. Portable dehumidifiers are much easier to service, clean, maintain, and if they go bad, replace. The three most common problems that I see in HVAC systems are duct leakage, improperly installed and maintained condensate pans, dirty systems due to improper filters and maintenance, and even if the building remediation is properly addressed, ignoring the HVAC system is going to lead to failure. Crawl spaces and attics are areas that are not intended for occupancy. Basements and attics are often converted to provide additional living space without having adequate measures in place to prevent problems from developing. When problems do develop in these areas, they frequently don't get discovered or addressed rapidly, which leads to major deterioration or unhealthy conditions. Problems in basements, crawl spaces, and attics don't fix themselves and frequently migrate into the living space with no visible indications until things have gone very, very wrong. Hidden mold conditions that are often present have been a major roadblock to successful whole house remediation. In April 2022 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Bill Weber and I introduced the concept of using the presence of peptide bonds and proteins found in mold, bacteria, and other common allergens to help identify pathways that were allowing contamination to travel from hidden locations into the living space. The presentation is posted for review at CIRSx.com. Collecting samples from surfaces to evaluate their condition using peptide bonds and proteins is a lower cost method to non-destructively screen for potentially hidden problems. To recap the process, traditional methods of investigation are used to determine if a problem is likely. MSQ-PCR sampling is used to provide objective evidence and indicate likely hidden growth sites that are present. Traditional methods for finding the areas of hidden mold growth or suspected mold growth are often destructive in nature. Carpets and pads are detached to look for hidden water and rust stains. Holes may be drilled in walls to extract air from wall cavities for analysis. Observation holes may be cut or baseboards removed to look for signs of water damage and growth. The traditional methods remain valuable techniques, but they're disruptive, destructive. They may not be practical. They may not be cost-effective and often are inadequate when growth is not dense enough for visible identification. Persons affected by CIRS and other water damage related conditions may be so sensitive that the lack of visual identification may be inadequate. Peptide bonds and protein testing is a non-destructive way to help to find where the issues are located. Samples are collected to identify pathways by using a microfiber swab to test 48 linear inch areas where the bottom edge of the baseboard meets the top of the floor. The mold and the bacteria, spores, and fragments travel from the hidden area of contamination into the living space. as the airflow exits the cracks and openings into the living space. The greatest quantities of peptide bonds and proteins will settle closest to where the contaminants exit the hidden location, coming into the home. By using a dense collection sampling pattern all the way around the perimeter of suspected rooms and testing both sides of the walls, the contamination pathways can be identified. Our subjective and objective observations and testing have led to an assessment resulting in a plan. Now it's time for implementation. But before beginning any disturbance of the areas of growth, containment and airflow needs to be installed to help control contaminants at their source. Many remediation companies go through the motions of setting up containment and airflow equipment without understanding the principles of how and when these tools should be used. This can result in spreading contaminants instead of controlling them. Studies conducted by environmental researchers and engineers Bob and Gail Brandeis has shown that as much as 50% of air filtration devices are not filtering properly and are responsible for spreading cross-contamination. The use of a particle counter to check equipment on every job can screen for such issues. The first principle of remediation is to control the moisture at its source. The second principle of remediation is to physically remove damaged and contaminated porous materials and provide access to hidden conditions so that they can be evaluated and properly addressed. Ideally, the source of the moisture will be repaired, controlled, or eliminated before beginning the physical removal of porous, nutritive materials, but sometimes it's not possible to determine the source of the moisture until the wall cavities have been exposed and the damaged materials removed. When working with hypersensitive persons, attempting to kill or encapsulate water damage issues rarely work and almost always make matters worse and more expensive to resolve. Physical removal has the benefit of removing the contamination without stimulating the production of biotoxins, inflammagens, and additional problem compounds. The problems created by attempts to kill or encapsulate organisms with antimicrobials and biocides are one of the biggest reasons for remediations to fail your patients. Once the porous materials that have supported mold growth have been removed and disposed, it's necessary to aggressively remove residual mold growth from surfaces that will remain in the building, such as wood framing. There are a variety of ways that is performed. Mold growth occurs on the surface of the wood. It doesn't penetrate any deeper than the thickness of a sheet of paper. It's the released spores, growth structures, and the fragments. Aggressive cleaning of the wood materials that are going to remain behind using wire brushes within the capture zone of an air filtration device or HEPA vacuum cleaner can help to collect the contaminants and limit their spread within the contamination zone. HEPA-filtered random orbital sanders are also available. Our first round of peptide bond and protein results have been returned from the laboratory. They are used to help expand the scope of remediation to include areas that have hidden hotspots. This is a tool that helps to revise and implement and update the SOAPier plan when needed. Peptide bond and protein residue testing can help guide the remediator to complete the removal. In most cases, it's preferable to anticipate and find the hidden issues and address them as a part of the remediation process instead of being surprised or disappointed by a post-remediation failure. Once the debris has been removed and aggressive cleaning of growth from surfaces accomplished, it's necessary to repeatedly clean until the levels of microscopic contamination that remain have been removed to normal background levels. In typical mold remediation, surfaces are supposed to be cleaned until they are dry and free of visible dust. Cleaning to a subvisible level using techniques similar to those developed for the electronics and pharmaceuticals cleanroom industry may be necessary. It's common for this necessary cleaning to require multiple rounds to be successful. The baseline peptide bond and protein levels can provide guidance to estimate the amount of cleaning that's going to be needed to return the building back to a normal condition. Repeated rounds of cleaning and testing can determine when the cleaning's been adequate and successful. Effective cleaning typically begins with HEPA vacuuming to remove large quantities of dust and dirt. HEPA vacuuming does a poor job of removing the fine particulates that are attracted to greasy surfaces or by electrostatic and molecular forces. The primary purpose of the HEPA vacuum is to prevent re-emission of the contaminants that are picked up by the vacuum cleaner. Damp wiping using disposable microfiber type cloths and a tolerated detergent or soap solution is used to remove the mold spores and fragments that are stuck to the lipid coatings on the surfaces. Methods for cleaning that address electrostatic charge and cause precipitation of fine particles onto horizontal surfaces such as floors facilitate a deep cleaning, allowing the nanoparticles to be effectively removed from surfaces. Areas that show overall low levels of peptide bonds and proteins either do not have a growth site nearby or have had adequate mitigation controls being used to help keep the contaminants under control. Peptide bond and protein testing is a good way of determining if cleaning has been successful. Testing for peptide bonds and proteins should typically be performed 15 minutes to 24 hours after the cleaning in order to indicate if the cleaning was effective. Repeating the peptide bond and protein testing of cleaned surfaces 1.5 to 2 weeks after cleaning can provide an indication if the peptide bonds and protein levels are increasing at a normal rate or at an exponential rate. This helps to interpret if the home has contamination levels under control or if they're accumulating at a faster than normal rate, which may be an indication that additional pockets of contamination remain. If pockets of additional contamination are suspected, then more intensive peptide bond and protein testing can help to determine the source. Sometimes we hear it said that air samples and some other forms of post-remediation testing are useless. And this is not necessarily true. Traditional methods of testing can have a great deal of value when they help find a problem. They can be used to declare that something is wrong. However, they may not be specific or sensitive enough to determine that everything is all right for persons with genetic predisposition to medical issues associated with water damage. Our clients and patients can be fragile, and it is easy for the team members to trigger feelings that send them from acceptance and working through the situations back to denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. The need to revise the remediation plan when more work needs to be done does not mean that there's been a total failure. Things get better each step along this path. No one method of testing can provide all the answers. There are many tools that can get us to success. What we need is a paradigm shift. The discussion regarding water damage, mold, bacteria, and healthy homes has been controlled by a variety of vested interests. It is time for public policy to address the issues that are faced by our clients and patients. It is essential that the causes of hidden water damage be addressed. If the source of the water isn't taken care of, then the problems with new growth will come back. It's all about the water. The perfect time to address these issues is while the home is in a partial state of disassembly, before reconstruction. Leak testing is one example of something that can and should be done while the wall cavities are open. There are many measures that can be taken during reconstruction to help or limit the risk of future water damage issues. But the most important measures that can be taken are to be vigilant and look for the signs of moisture entry, and to anticipate the development of issues with proactive inspection and maintenance. After remediation has been completed, all homes will have some building memory. Residual spores, fragments, and particles will remain hidden in electrical outlets and fixtures, cracks, crevices, nooks, and crannies. Matching cleaning frequency to the normal buildup can help to mitigate potential issues with a home that's already been remediated, but is causing problems for sensitive occupants because of the residual contaminants that are working their way into the living space. Occasional peptide bond and protein testing can help to monitor for potential buildups and allow proactive actions before conditions become critical. So indoor environmental professionals and remediators that are working to help your patients get well need your help. There are several things that you can do. First, what subjective and objective information do you, the physician, need to assist you with your diagnosis and plan with regards to your patient's home? Secondly, what information does the environmental consultant need from you to effectively consider your patient's home environment? One way to remain HIPAA compliant is to provide your patients a referral sheet that they can give to the indoor environmental professional and remediator. Give this to your patients so that they can give it to the people that they will be hiring. Let the consultant know you need speciation and that mold-specific quantitative PCR is the only readily available method that provides the speciation information that you, the physician, need for both viable and non-viable organisms. Other types of tests may also be valuable. Culturable testing can provide speciation for a broader range of viable organisms that are not included on the ERMI panel developed by the EPA researchers. Work to develop environmental consultants and remediators that you can trust to help your patients. They need to understand that they are a part of a medical support team, that the work that they do is important for the health and well-being of your patient, and that you, the physician, are going to expect them to perform appropriately and to do no harm to your patients through their work practices. CIRSx is working to develop the types of tools that will help you educate your patients, as well as the environmental consultants and remediators that they will be working with. Thank you.